American soldiers on American streets. Not for a parade, but for a showdown. A city under curfew, and a president drawing a line in the sand, labeling protesters as insurrectionists. This isn't a dystopian movie. This was the reality in Los Angeles. What happens when federal power collides with local protest? That's the explosive question we're tackling today in our deep dive, which we're calling Trump vs. California, the Showdown. Welcome to US and World Politics Decoded, your channel for understanding the stories behind the headlines. Have you ever wondered where the line is? The line between a righteous protest and a federal emergency? What happens when a president, against the direct wishes of a state's own governor, decides to send in the USMarines to handle a domestic situation? This isn't a theoretical debate. It's a situation that unfolded in a major American city, pushing the country into a fierce debate about power, rights, and the very definition of democracy. We're going to break down how a series of immigration raids escalated into a national crisis that saw military forces deployed on U.S. soil in a way not seen in decades. Stay with us. Our timeline begins on a Friday in Los Angeles, the second largest city in the United States. The flashpoint? The city's bustling garment district. Federal agents descended as part of a new, aggressive strategy from the Trump administration. Workplace raids targeting suspected undocumented immigrants. But they weren't met with silence. Immediately, protesters gathered. They chanted, they threw eggs, and they made their opposition known. The official response was just as swift. Pepper spray and non-lethal munitions were used to disperse the crowds. This was the first spark in a fire that would soon rage across the city and capture the nation's attention. By Saturday, the unrest had metastasized. The protests weren't just in the city center anymore. They had spread to the suburbs, like the predominantly Latino working-class community of Paramount, about 15 miles south. The scenes became more chaotic. Clashes with law enforcement led to arrests, and authorities deployed riot munitions, tear gas, and stun grenades against the demonstrators. But the situation was about to escalate from a local policing issue to a federal military intervention. From Washington, President Trump was watching, and he decided to act. Here is where the story takes a turn that civil liberties experts and historians find deeply controversial. On Saturday, despite the insistence of California authorities that local law enforcement had the situation under control, President Trump signed a memorandum. He ordered 2,000 members of the National Guard to Los Angeles, stating their mission was to protect federal agents and property. Let's be clear about how unusual this is. The National Guard is typically deployed by a state's governor for disasters like floods or wildfires. For a president to activate a state's guard for a law enforcement purpose without a request from the governor is exceedingly rare. The last time it happened was in 1965, when President Johnson federalized the Guard to protect civil rights marchers in Alabama. But President Trump didn't stop there. 2 days later, as protests continued, he doubled down. He increased the number of Guard soldiers to 4,000 and mobilized a battalion of 700 active-duty United States Marines, sending them into the city. By Tuesday, armed National Guard soldiers were seen on the streets, actively joining federal immigration agents during raids, a move the state of California would later call illegal and inflammatory. The White House's justification was stark. President Trump branded the protesters in Los Angeles as insurrectionists and vowed he would liberate the city. This language isn't just political rhetoric. It's a legal signal. It appears to be a deliberate step towards invoking the Insurrection Act of 1807, a law that grants the president the authority to deploy active-duty U.S. military personnel to suppress a domestic rebellion. The move triggered a constitutional firestorm. California's Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, delivered a nationally televised address with a message directly challenging the president. He didn't mince words. He called the deployment a blatant abuse of power that had inflamed a combustible situation. He told Americans they were facing a dangerous moment for their democracy. This wasn't just a war of words. The state of California officially sued the Trump administration. They argued the military mobilization was an illegal usurpation of state power and filed an emergency motion in federal court, demanding that the Marines and Guard soldiers be restricted only to guarding federal buildings. Back in Los Angeles, the city was on edge. After episodes of looting and vandalism led to around 200 arrests on Tuesday, the most in a single day, Mayor Karen Bass announced a nighttime curfew for the downtown area. While the mayor stressed that the curfew zone was a relatively small 2.5 square kilometers, in a city of nearly 1,300, the message was clear. The city was in a state of emergency, and the fire was spreading. The events in LA became a rallying cry across the country. In Chicago, protesters threw water bottles at police and vandalized vehicles. In New York City, dozens of arrests were made near federal buildings in Lower Manhattan. In Atlanta, police used chemical agents to clear protesters off a major highway. Demonstrations were planned in cities from Seattle to San Antonio as the nation watched and debated the dramatic events unfolding in California. So, what are the major takeaways from this chaotic week? First, we witnessed a profound clash over the limits of federal power. The Trump administration argued it was taking necessary action to stop what it termed an insurrection and protect federal law enforcement. They portrayed the military deployment as a move to restore order. On the other side, state and local officials in California saw it as an unprecedented and illegal federal overreach. They argued that deploying soldiers against the governor's wishes was a dangerous political act that escalated tensions and threatened the balance of power between Washington and the states. Second, the events forced a national conversation about the nature of protest itself. When does a demonstration, even one with instances of property damage, cross the line into a rebellion that justifies a military response? Using terms like insurrectionist and deploying the Marines as consequences, reframing the political debate and raising the stakes for anyone exercising their right to assemble. Finally, the crisis in Los Angeles didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the culmination of rising anger over federal immigration policy. What began with raids on workplaces spiraled into a conflict that tested the guardrails of American democracy, leaving a nation to grapple with images of its own military deployed in one of its biggest cities. The questions raised by these events are not going away. This is a story we will continue to follow here at US and World Politics Decoded. What are your thoughts? Was the federal response justified, or a dangerous abuse of authority? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this breakdown informative and want to keep making sense of the complex world of politics, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to see it. Most importantly, make sure you subscribe to US and World Politics Decoded and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive. Thank you for watching.